Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this European Union Sustainable Energy Week session on energy communities. This year, the whole EUSEF is focusing on the topic beyond the crisis, clean energy from green recovery and growth, where the energy communities has many things to contribute to that. My name is Manuel Sanchez. I'm a team leader for a smart grid at the European Commission in DG Energy. I'm working on the Directorate for Internal Energy Market for electricity and gas, and particularly I'm working on the retail market unit, quite focused on these activities and close to consumer. Today we have more than 1,000 registered participants, and I'm going to moderate this web event where we are organizing between the DG NR Commission and the Community of Power Coalition, which is a coalition for the EU cooperated organizations, cities and civil society and industry organizations which are working together to increase the citizen and the community ownership of renewable energies. In this 1.5 hours, we have going to talk on how to empower consumer through the energy communities. Energy communities is a new actor and introduced in the energy electricity market design in the clean energy package, and is recognize the citizen and the driving force for the energy transition. We had similar let's say, events already last year in Dublin Forum or Citizen Forum, and also in the EUSEF of 2019, with some of the speakers of this session participate. This event was organized in 4 main blocks. One, where we have some invited speakers, mainly commission, where we have my director, Katarina Siku Magni, who is going to introduce, hello Katarina, who is going to introduce us the policy drivers and the target of today's meeting, to focus what are the questions to answer and what are the key topics to discuss. Then my colleague Marion Malafos, hello Marion.
Hi, good afternoon.
And Jan Steinkol, hello, from the Renewables Energy Unit. Both are going to tell us about the legal basis and the framework, on the new framework for this new actor in the market. Then we have another block, which is consisting in a panel of very well-known experts, which provided the different voices, people who are really close and working on these activities. We have here Josh Robert. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Manuel. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. He participated also in the Dublin Forum, sharing experiences of RESCOP. This is an association, a company, which is working here in Belgium. And congratulations also, RESCOP got the Community Virtual Power Plant Award in this EUSEW2020 session. Congratulations for that. You will tell us something about. We have also, a city as a best practice, good examples, and we have with us Hans van der Locht. Hello, Hans. He's for the city of Haarlem in the Netherlands. Then Lynn Peters. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. Hello.
We have, you participated already a couple of sessions last year, and he's the CEO of ThinkE. It's a company in Belgium which is making large experiences with communities. We invited also Frauke Thies. Frauke, what is? Hi, good afternoon, Frauke.
Hello, I'm Manuel. Hello, everyone.
She's the executive director of Smart N. It's an association in Brussels for the digital and decentralized energy solutions. I think everybody knows you, not necessarily even sometimes to introduce you here. And then we have, last but not least in the panel, Paddy Pellan. Is a CEO of the Three Countries Energy Agency for Ireland. Hello, Paddy.
Good afternoon, all.
I see you. Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. And the last block is, then we have an intermediate block of question and answer. Your question will be received. Some of them would be condensed or summarized with similar questions. We will try to answer as much as possible, but I'm sure even later some of the panelists could continue answer to you by electronic emails. And then we have the last session for closing, where we have Jan Panek is already joining us. Not yet. He's the head of unit.
I'm here. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, Jan. Well, he was my previous head of unit in DGNL, but now he's in DG Justice, of course, working very close to consumer also. And hi, good to have you here. With Jan, we started creating this kind of new actor in 2016, 2017 in preparation of this package. Well, say that, let's go directly into the interesting messages and information that Katarina is preparing for us to give us the policy drivers. Katarina, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Manuel, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today to kickstart the discussion of this important session. And I'm extremely impressed by the number of registered participants. So we're speaking about 1,000 people, and I think that's maybe one of the rare added values or advantages of this virtual way of working where we are. Would be difficult to find a meeting room that could ever fit 1,000 people in one meeting room. So I really look forward to a very good discussion today and an interactive participation from the audience through the various tools that we have at our disposal. So today, what we're discussing on how to empower consumers through energy communities, be these citizen energy communities or be these renewable energy communities. So the topic is then to look at what the legal framework tells us and how we can best use those. And my two colleagues that Manuel already introduced, so Marion and Jan, will give you much more insight into what the legal framework allows and makes it possible and how we can make that function very well. Because we all know that ultimately the energy transition will be successful only if we get the citizens on board with us. Be this then through them taking active measures in their daily lives, in their households, in producing energy, consuming energy, sharing flexibility, etc., or also through acceptance of the energy transition. 90% of the citizens tell us throughout different polls that they do want to take actively part in the transition, but sometimes they find it more cumbersome than what it should be. So the aim that we have is to make even stronger the aims and the ambition of the European Green Deal that President von der Leyen put on the table at the beginning of her mandate, putting people first, putting the consumer at the real center of the energy market and energy transition. And the energy communities will play an important role in this respect. They will certainly change, I would even say dramatically, the energy landscape as we see it and as we know it today, with time when people will have access to more or will produce more decentralized energy and will take part in the market as active players. So therefore, building on the very positive experience in some member states where these kind of communities have already emerged, where citizens come together, the idea was brought into the clean energy package. So in the clean energy package, the role of citizens is further enhanced and will be further discussed today. So the clean energy package provides open and general principles for member states then to transpose these in national law, and we look forward to making sure that this all works in the best way. Energy communities are for sure a key enabler of the energy transition to happen in a more democratic and inclusive way. And we know that this is what citizens want. We know that especially the young people want to actively take part in decision making and in the energy transition. Energy communities can also provide direct benefits for consumers beyond being an active player in the market by advancing energy efficiency and lowering energy bills. Through this, it also helps address energy poverty. So by directly engaging with consumers, energy communities demonstrate their potential to facilitate the uptake of new technologies and consumption patterns. Energy communities also enable certain groups of household customers to participate in the market and to take ownership of clean energy transition, who otherwise might not have this possibility to do so. Where energy communities have been successfully operated, such initiatives have delivered economic, social, and environmental benefits to the community that it has engaged and brought together. And these benefits go beyond mere benefits derived from the provision of energy services. In particular, they have the potential to support local job creation and local economic activity, which of course are of key importance in today's hopefully already post-COVID world, where we need to bring the economy back to speed and help people there to find back their jobs and economic activities. Finally, energy communities will play a key role in reaching the objectives of the Green Deal and will contribute in particular to two upcoming flagship strategies that the Commission will present in the coming weeks. In particular, energy communities can support both the energy system integration by empowering consumers to become active and to contribute to the overall balance and flexibility of the system, be it then energy in relation to electric vehicles in transport or any other type of sector system integration activity. And the other upcoming policy that we are going to table where energy communities can play an important role is the renovation wave that we will present after the summer break to upscale energy efficiency and energy savings initiatives, and when also at the same time Commission will provide guidance to member states to address energy poverty, which often is of course linked to inefficient housing conditions. So energy communities will and can play a key role in implementing these two strategies: energy system integration strategy and the renovation wave. Then to conclude, so if we want to accelerate the deployment of energy communities in Europe, the first step is transposition of the EU law, the Clean Energy Package provisions, in member states' law. Colleagues have been in contact with many member states to address and to answer the issues that they are raising, the questions they have and concerns they may be facing in doing this. So this is actively ongoing with member states, national regulators, stakeholders like distribution system operators and other local actors. But beyond the regulatory framework, there are also some barriers that need to be addressed to reap all the full benefits from energy communities. Access to finance is to be accelerated and simplified. Administrative and technical barriers need to be looked at so that these don't create hurdles for citizens and businesses to create energy communities. So a key element in this success is to support the exchange of best practices. We can learn a lot from each other, between member states, between local actors, etc. So in this context, the Commission will launch at the end of the year a pilot project that will provide monitoring and support to energy communities and will contribute to the dissemination of best practices across the EU. Last but not least, raising awareness among citizens will be a key element of making energy communities happen. I'm pretty sure that there are numerous citizens in the EU that don't yet know what the new legislation, what these new tools can provide them and what they can access. So we need to continue the outreach, and we need to make sure that the citizens who are the key players in this know what they can do, how they can do it, and how they can create their own energy communities. So citizens, local communities, municipalities are the key players in this area, in addition to member states and the regulators. So all these positive elements that I touched upon very briefly can be brought into reality by making this world happen and working closer together with the actors who are to be put in the center of the energy policy by getting the energy communities up and running. So I will close here, and I will wish you a very fruitful discussion. You have very prominent speakers on the panel, and I'm sure that we will be much wiser after this session than we were at the start of the session. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katarina. I think it was very clear to continue to implement, to learn, and to share. That's really key wording for these messages. Without any delay more, I think there is not like in a physical meeting any question and so on. We'll pass the floor to my colleagues Marion and Jan, who are going to provide us the legal framework, the legal basis for the energy communities. But I think also Marion has some housekeeping rules to explain to the participants before. But please, Marion, start you.
Yes, thank you, Manuel, and thank you, Katarina, for the very good introduction to this topic. So before we start in explaining the framework that is in the Clean Energy Package for energy communities, we will be running a Slido poll. So if you, for all the participants, if you look within the video stream, so you have the Slido below, and the question will be popping up. So this question is, we want to know our audience a bit more and know what are your expectations from this session. So the question is, are you familiar with the concept of citizens' energy communities and renewable energy communities? So while we have the answers coming in, I will also tell you about the Q&A session, which will take place after the panel discussion. So once we have all the panelists who have done their presentation, you can already start sending your question. I see we have already plenty of them. So we will collect them, send them to our moderator for the panel discussion. Don't hesitate to vote by clicking on the thumb up icon. So because if we have a lot of questions, we might only be able to take the one with the highest ranking. So please do also vote for the questions that you see fit for this session. Okay, so I see that the majority of the poll replies is in the middle, in fact. So people have some notion about energy communities and the legal concepts of the EU legislation. So I think this is the right place to further develop these notions and to make sure that you leave this session with a bit more understanding of this concept, because this is key, as we mentioned, for the dissemination of best practices and to make sure that we do have experts on the ground in supporting, in developing, and assisting energy communities at the local level. So now I will start giving the floor also to my colleague Jan, who will discuss how communities and consumer empowerment are contributing to the clean energy transition.
Yes, good afternoon. And most of you have some notions, but for those who are not sure about what the purpose is meant to be, we'd like to start with recalling that. We included energy communities in our legislation because we thought that they are a very effective tool for engaging consumers and also to increase public acceptance of renewable energy projects. We also know that we need a lot of investments to make the energy transition happen, and energy communities are a way to mobilize private capital for this transition.
Yes, and they are also a way to increase the flexibility of the energy system, which is becoming more and more needed in the context of decentralization and growing share of viable renewable energy. So next slide, please. So energy communities, in the sense of collective actions of consumers, have been there for many years already in some member states. In others, less so. So as Jan said, we have acknowledged the role that energy communities play, and for the first time, we have introduced them in EU legislation. So that's a big push to make sure that we have member states implementing the right framework to support the development and the deployment of such communities across Europe. So we have next slide, please, for the definition. Yes, so we have introduced the concept of citizens' energy communities in the electricity directive. The purpose here is to recognize this new market actor and to make sure that it can have a role to play in the electricity market on a equal level playing field with other market actors.
And this concept is mirrored in the Renewable Energy Directive. So we have the similar concept, but with a focus on renewable energy, and those are the renewable energy communities. Both directives also contain a definition, and this definition is very important actually in both directives, because it's the definition that makes crystal clear that the energy communities are first and foremost a social concept. It's not something that's about activities, but it's something about who does and carries out these activities. Next slide, please. And here you see we try to show the main differences and similarities between the energy communities. CECs are citizen energy communities. They are the ones that are regulated in the Internal Market Directive, Electricity Directive, and they, as the name of the directive would suggest, are about electricity, all sorts of electricity. Whereas renewable energy directives are all about all types of energy, as long as it's renewable. Membership criteria are similar, but slightly more restrictive for renewable energy communities. And also in line with that is the question who is allowed to control such a community. And here again, it's has to be controlled for any renewable energy communities by people living in the proximity of the renewable energy project. And the reason here is linking back to the purpose that we see renewable energy communities as one way to increase the public acceptance of such projects.
And a common element to these two concepts is that energy communities are value-driven. So they have for primary purposes to provide social, economic benefits to the community, to its member, but also to the local area where it operates. And it's important to see the activities that they can engage in. So it can be generation, storage, consumption, even sharing, which is a novelty that is introduced in the legislation. But it's important also to recall that the energy communities are not defined by their activities, but really by their purpose, their objective, which is value driven. Next slide, please. So we have now the important task ahead of us, or at least more specifically for the member states and the regulatory authorities, with the transposition. You have two deadlines because these two concepts are in two different legislative pieces. Next slide, please.
And the summary of what we've just presented, for those of you who are new to the idea, please retain that it's a social concept. So it's not a technical concept, but it's about the social concept which is meant to contribute to the empowerment of citizens and consumers to have a fair and inclusive energy transition.
Yes, and that is also ensured by the benefits that the communities will bring to the citizens, and that Katarina mentioned in terms of lower energy bills, better air quality. It helps addressing energy poverty, for instance. So all these are very important elements, and what is extremely important as well is that it is also targeted and it ensures that these benefits can be felt on the ground and in all territories. So we think about cities on one side, and that can be the first idea that comes to mind, but it's also extremely relevant for islands, especially those who are extremely reliant on heavy fossil fuels, but who, despite that, have important natural assets and natural important renewable potential. So the energy communities could help boost this potential. And this is the same also for rural areas, and that can also contribute to boosting a bit the economic activities where you have farming activities declining. And that's a very important element to also look at all the different territories in that context. Thank you. So I hope this provides some good insight as to what are the purpose of energy communities. Manuel, the floor is to you now.
Thank you very much. That was very clear and good comparison between the two legislative parts. One thing is coming to my mind, because we have about 72% or 74% of people who say, I have some notion, or 20% are specialized on that. However, it came to me what the Commission is doing in order to facilitate or to, let's say, to disseminate the implementation, facilitate and disseminate the implementation of this concept. What can you explain to the people what we are doing?
So the transposition is with the member states at the moment, but we are clearly assisting them in this exercise. So we engage regularly and bilaterally with them, with the ministries, with the regulators as well. We've also tried to enhance the knowledge sharing, to build up our knowledge also through some studies, and in particular under the Bridge Task Force on Energy Communities, where Lynn is also very much involved in that. And then we will also push forward this dissemination of best practices and outreach at the local level, also through the pilot project that Katarina mentioned, and that will be launched at the end of the year as well.
Yeah, you want to add something more?
Well, I think what we try to say here, because like you say, many people have some form or kind of notion of what this could be, And then, depending on which member state you look at, the notions tend to be slightly different. Some see it as a tool of sector integration, sector coupling. Some see it more as a way to increase renewable energy production. And this is something that we're trying to clarify also by engaging with as many stakeholders as possible. And of course, I mean, Josh is here, and the relevant stakeholder organizations, of course, also now need to are already informing citizens about the possibilities that this European legislation brings for them. Because yes, it's there, but it also needs to be taken up in the end on the ground.
Thank you. You wanted to make any questions now, or Marion, to the audience?
No, we can leave them. We can leave them to the Q&A and go to the panel discussion, because I see we're already running a bit after time. Yeah.
After all explanation. Well, then we go directly jumping into the panel. We have an excellent panel of people. Let us start. I introduced already all of them. Let us start now for the one by one. Josh, the floor is yours, please.
All right, thank you again, Manuel. Yes, so RescuPU, I mean, for those of you that don't know us, we were kind of the drivers behind this concept of energy communities. We represent about 1,500 different types of ResCoops, renewable energy cooperatives or citizen energy cooperatives that participate across the energy sector. And I'd have to say that this has been a European-wide movement. We say together with our members, we represent around 1 million citizens, but we consider ourselves the first million, so we really want to expand that, and we've been working with a lot of different organizations in the Community Power Coalition here in Brussels, based from national organizations working on this issue. And I don't need to repeat it. I think Katarina, Jan, and Marion have explained the basics quite well. And basically, I think what we are looking at here is an immense opportunity where the EU, previously, consumer empowerment was about informing consumers about their energy bill. And now we are really talking about the possibility of being able to take ownership and responsibility for meeting your own energy needs as a citizen and as a community. And that can bring immense benefits. I'd just like to, you heard all of them, but I think one of the most important ones now that we are in this interesting time is around the local value added and in terms of local economic development. And some of our members have shown or are doing studies about local ownership of renewable energy being able to produce 2 to 3, sometimes 8 times more local value than a large commercially driven project. So this is a real opportunity, and we need to make sure that as we rebuild our communities, that this is taken into account. I say opportunity because what we have is we have a really good looking piece of legislation, or a couple pieces of legislation at EU level. But the reality in most member states across the EU is that it's impossible to start an energy community, or people don't really know where to start. And that's where we and our members and our partners are coming in. We actually just today released a transposition guidance document. You can find it on our website. We did this together with Client Earth and with input from other members of the coalition. And this is really to give member states and decision makers a sort of wind in their sails if they're not really sure where to start. And I have to say, there are a lot of best practices that are out there, some which were existing long before energy communities even became part of the lexicon of energy policy. One of the most interesting, I think, is Greece, where in 2018, they basically created a brand new piece of legislation acknowledging energy communities, what they are, properly defining them, providing them with different support, and sort of basically creating a whole heap of list of activities that they could do. And of course, it's not perfect, but it's really showing what citizens are able to do. I think, and there's a lot of other more groundbreaking tools that citizens need in terms of capacity building and finance. And we see governments like Ireland sort of creating special tailored support schemes that provide both operational support to energy communities if they can get a project up and running and producing electricity, but also providing the investment support that these types of communities need in order to get the project rolling, and other different types of capacity building. I think in terms of one of the big challenges, and I believe Katerina mentioned it, but that's in terms of regulation. And I won't go too much into that because I think Lean has something to say, but one of the important fundamental aspects of acknowledging energy communities here is really that we are talking about a non-commercial market actor that is bringing together citizens as non-professionals, other small, medium enterprises at the local level to engage in an economic activity. And what we really need to make sure is that they have an equal playing field. So when we are looking at new and innovative activities like self-consumption and energy sharing, we really need to revisit how we do regulation. I will just end with something that Manuel mentioned, the community VPP project that won an award here. And I mean, this is really nothing new. They're not doing anything new, innovative, technically speaking. What they are doing is innovative, socially speaking. And I think if people really want to understand what is the difference between a community project and a different type of innovation, you need only look to that project, because it provides a very good example of what citizens are actually trying to do in terms of ground or bottom-up social innovation in the energy sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Well, I think we are very much screwed with the time, and we go directly into the next speaker, and then listen the question and putting question later. We have in the list, the next is from the city of Herlin, where we have Hans Borderloch. The floor is yours, please.
Yes, if I can have my slides, please. I'm working for the city of Heerlen, and I have to apologize. My deputy mayor is not here because there was a special council meeting at this moment about our new mayor. So I will tell you something about Heerlen. We started with a project where we had to put up 5,000 solar panels on the roofs at the city center. When I was investigating it, what the opportunities were, I saw that it was almost impossible to put those solar panels on the roofs ourselves and ask others to put them on their roofs. So then we started with the idea of working together with inhabitants, with people within the city center, to see if we could build a community which will put on the solar panels on the roof. And something very important for me was that it should not only give us the solar panels, this project, but also give us a special community within the city center where they can work on some added value, more than only the result of the energy production. So I got into contact with Leo Krombach. He's in the meeting too. And he started a process with the people from the city center to see how we could work together in this project. And on the next slide, we have some arguments which Leo can tell us all about. So I will give the floor to Leo.
I organized a group of people in the center of Heerlen, of the municipal Heerlen, and the group is about 35 people big, and we are transformed that into a corporation, an energy corporation. And in the board of the Energy Corporation, we have board members to the age of 35, between 25 and 35. So we have a very young and inspiring board, because we believe that the youth have the future in their hands and they can build also their own future with solar panels. But another thing we created, we added value to the solar panels, social value. So people, we included that we addressed in the corporation that it is important that everybody can join the corporation from the city of Heerlen. But they also sign in a covenant that they will drop a little bit of the money they can earn with the energy project to a fund, and the fund will be used, by example, to work on energy poverty, by example, or some nice project in the city, so that we can create a refunding fund for the city by using the solar panels as a battery of energy to add value, social value to the city. And that are topics that young people they like that very much. They think it's very interesting. And as we speak, they are now building work communities, a community, by example, for administration, a community about technical support, a community about how to increase more members to the community. So they are empowering now people in the city of Heerlen to join the movement, actually. And the easy steps they make of the progress that they are making on this project is that they easily can explain the values for the city. It's not about the energy and the less payments you have on the energy bill. No, it is all about the value you bring to the city. And that is an important thing to address, especially to young people.
Thank you, Leo.
Well, thank you very much for the explanation about your experience and expectations. Let's go to the next one. Lynn Peters, could you? You are not new in this discussion, Lynn. We just expecting you to provide additional information of your experiences in the number of projects you are running now. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So thank you, Manuel, for inviting me. Thank you, Marion, as well. So I'm indeed leading the task force local energy communities, or let's say energy communities within Bridge, where also Rescope is one of the participants to help developing the different topics. And currently we're working on two tracks. One is that a number of us is interacting, performing interviews with policy level in the different member states. And I am, together with Andreas Turk from Uranium Research in Austria, we are performing a number of interviews with energy regulators in the different member states. What we're trying to do is understand how they look at it, how they look at the tariffing scheme, how they look at the concept of fairness and discrimination in energy tariffs, things like that. And Marion indeed asked me three statements. What Marion already said earlier in this telco or in this webinar was that the future is about flexibility. And when I hear people saying self-consumption, then I'm just a bit afraid that if we start focusing on self-consumption, flexibility is something else. If we want to move to a 100% renewable energy system, then it requires us to implement central and decentrally implemented assets for renewable energy. And so these are both intermittent. They're variable production profiles, and we have to provide as much flexibility as possible. If we move to a circular economy, we also have to make sure that we use the assets that we already have instead of starting to add additional assets like batteries, things like that. And sometimes self-consumption can be aligned with flexibility, but it is not always the case. So we really have to make sure that we do understand that self-consumption is sometimes what we should do, but sometimes it is not. And the number of areas, DSO areas, where self-consumption is already needed in order to increase the amount of renewables and further thickening the cables isn't possible anymore, is extremely limited in Europe. So we have to be fair and we have to acknowledge that generally flexibility is not by definition the same as self-sufficiency or, let's say, self-consumption. And so the focus should be on valorizing that flexibility rather than what some member states do now, pushing towards maximizing the economic value of self-consumption. The other statement that I made was that we have to make a fair proposal to all end consumers. What I mean with that is that the energy system includes participants of energy communities and participants and people that decide not to join. And it is really important to take into account a few things when designing the enabling framework for the concept of energy community. First of all, the cost of the distribution and transmission system is strongly determined by the infrastructure that is already out there, the typical sunk cost. And the current way, and I clearly say the current way, of distributing this sunk cost is either dividing it over the kilowatts or the kilowatt hours, but all consumers contribute to that because we all use it when we go to a school, when we go to a shop, we all use, when we drive on a road or bike, we all use that infrastructure. So we all have to contribute to that. We cannot exclude a number of people to not pay for it just because they manage to organize themselves. If a certain behavior is remunerated, let's say a certain flexibility is remunerated in one way or another through the tariff or otherwise, the value cannot depend on the provider of the service. And it is really, really important. That is the principle of fairness and non-discrimination. So we cannot exclude energy communities to join a certain energy market service, but we can also not exclude non-participants. The regulator has to design the service model and anyone can contribute. The remunerated behavior of energy communities, if we would do it in a tariff, has to focus on the added value that they create compared to a reference of a non-cooperation. And that is also important. It's just not by bringing them together that by definition you increase the amount of self-consumption, that is to be remunerated. The point is what we want energy communities to do is create social cohesion and other benefits, but also really help to realize that 100% renewable energy future. What Katarina said earlier today was about acceptance. And I think we're all in this webinar interested in energy. We did a research with over 800 participants in Flanders, and 46% of the end consumers turned out to be followers. So only 25%, about 25%, were convinced to join an energy community and would be the ones that says, okay, we go for it. Aside from technical aspects, we have to unburden the end consumer. I mean, we cannot expect all of them to be happy and join and you know, the majority is a follower who just, you know, I can join, but just don't make sure that I don't have to bother about things. And so we kind of have to seduce them, whether to join an energy community or to become an active member of the energy system. Then my last one is a bit a provocation. Energy communities are a means and not a goal as such. If I look at it from the energy system perspective, then energy communities are one of the ways in the clean energy package to make sure that we provide a way to go to the 100% renewable energy system. There are many others. So we have to make sure that we enable a lot of good things, but that we also make sure that we do not focus on something where a potentially easier or less expensive alternative could be a valuable contribution as well. We have to make sure that what we present, and I'll come back to what Josh already said. Josh has been working with energy communities and cooperatives already for a long time, even before this legislation was out there. the models they put in the landscape are upscalable, they're replicable, and in some member states they're not, and that's why we need this legislation. But we cannot come with models that are not upscalable. And when we talk to some of the regulators, where you see models where they simply say, okay, if you're part of an energy community, you can have a 60% reduction in your electricity tariff, and all the others have to compensate for that. That is something where we have to be careful. And so my last point is that we really have to make sure that when it comes to the tariff and the remuneration of services, that this is a regulatory aspect where we have to make sure that it is fair and it is democratic and it is non-discriminatory. But when it comes to the policy level, there is no reason why we could not valorize that layer, that flavor that we add, and that also Leo mentioned, that is related to the social cohesion. And that is a value that we also have to encourage, that we have to nourish to maximize the potential of that.
Thank you, Lee. That's talking about the tariff is a complicated topic and very specialized, but this should be done vis-a-vis the regulators. You're totally right on that. Frauke, I think now the floor is yours from your expectation and your messages from your association, Smarten. Pardon.
Thank you very much, Manuel. And I was asked also to prepare some slides. I don't know if they're there. Otherwise, I can just start anyway. And I think yes, there we are. We can go right next to the next slide, I think. Mary, maybe very briefly, Smarten is the European Business Association for demand-side flexibility. So our mission is really to ensure that every home, every building, every car, every business can become an active part of the energy transition. And in that, I think my messages connect very well to those that Lynn put forward just now. And I think when we look at energy communities, traditionally they've been, I think, particularly central in driving investments in clean energy solutions. And I'll go a bit more into that. I think we're moving to the next level because it's no longer just about investing in the clean technologies, but communities will increasingly become central also to running a system that is based on increasing amounts of variable renewables. And that means active participation into the system beyond just the installation of solar panels and wind farms. And if we go to the next slide, apologies because I haven't sticked to the Commission terminology of renewable communities and citizen energy communities, but I've made the distinction here between local communities, meaning it's in an area, connected assets and solutions can even be on an island, and virtual communities. And when we look at local communities, essentially where we're coming from was local communities invested their decentralized energy resources, renewables, storage, including also and increasingly demand-side flexibility, demand response solutions. So investing in them, potentially sharing joint infrastructure, be it connecting these with district heating networks, be it through microgrids, or simply exchanging locally, exchanging energy, exchanging services, in a way forming a virtual power plant locally. And an example of that would be, for instance, the Brunntal energy community, where people basically, maybe one household may have a surplus in electricity generation, another one may want to charge their electric vehicle. They are facilitated between each other and within the community optimize their energy use. But then, of course, it can go even beyond that, because the community can optimize not only internally and within their own borders, but actually sell their potentials in an aggregated form to the energy market. So interact with the network that goes beyond the local community, depending on system needs and signals that they receive from the market. This is something that is already happening for some local communities, and we are seeing examples where either there are direct price signals or communities are basically either themselves acting as an aggregator or working with an aggregator to sell their services to the network. If we move to the next, well, obviously the last one, the last point on selling to the system for islands depends, because if the local community is just an island, then it will optimize within. Virtual communities. I think where we're coming from was initially, virtual communities basically means people don't necessarily connect locally, but it's people spread across the country, the continent, investing in clean solutions. And traditionally it was that, investing in a share of a wind farm, for instance, a solar project, or collectively purchasing. But it's increasingly also become an exchange of energy or services between the members of the virtual community. Again, there are examples, various examples of that. One that springs to mind is Anyway, for instance, where you can basically connect. As a user, I can connect with anybody who owns renewables and who can sell to me, and I as a user know where my energy is coming from. I'm part of this community. But it can go even beyond, and there are also examples of that. Sonnen is a name that springs to mind, that this community doesn't only optimize internally inside the community, but again interacts with the market, provides flexibility, uses the collective potential of the community, of storage, of flexibility, of generation to provide services to the market, to the overall system, to stabilize not only within the community, but also with the system, the balancing of variable renewables output and the needs of the system. If we go to my final slide, why does it matter, and why is this a good idea for consumers, and why is it for the system? Clearly, on the consumer side, there are many economic drivers, and I can't go into the details of these, but maybe we come back to those in the discussion. But clearly, some of them today are very much driven by also support frameworks. Increasingly, it also needs to transfer into system signals, and I think that is also what Lynn indicated before. But people also do it for enhanced energy services, to contribute to the clean energy transition and know what they're doing. Independence and trusted sources, because I know where my energy is coming from exactly, and not just because there's a green certificate on it, but because I know which windmill or solar panel is supplying me. And then security of supply and resilience may be less of a driver in most parts of Europe, but can be very important in areas where outages are still common. But then I think what is very interesting here, and I already saw in Slido earlier that there were questions about what does it mean for those who are not directly involved in communities? What about all these other customers? And here comes the question, what are the benefits of communities, and what can the benefits be socioeconomically? Well, clearly, energy communities can be a key driving force for clean energy investments and for decarbonization. For instance, I know one study by CE Delft estimates that around 20% of solar and wind, and I'm rounding the numbers here, but could be owned by energy communities by 2030, simply because they are one source of investments. They can, as I mentioned, provide system services for stability and resilience. And if there are questions about that, I can go into further detail on how exactly this flexibility is activated. But by that, enforce the energy system and basically resilience for all, but then reduce energy cost for all. And that, I think, is especially the response to the question that I saw in Slido. Because energy communities, by providing services to the system, they increase competition in the market. They increase the offer in the market of what is there. So that is one way of reducing cost, but also by optimizing, if done well, by optimizing locally, they decrease the pressure on the system and again reduce cost, not only for those participating, but for all energy users. That said, of course, that depends very much on the signals that this community is receiving. I think generally the communities will react based on the signals they receive, especially for energy communities, we can assume that most often these tend to be people who actually want to engage and make a positive contribution, otherwise they wouldn't engage. And if they receive the right signals to do so, I think they would be more than pleased. So the challenge is to transition from today's signals, which are very often about, for instance, feed-in tariffs, self-consumption that is mainly focused on optimizing on-site, to signals that show more what is also going on in the system and how the community can play a positive contribution in that respect. I'm aware that this is fairly conceptual, but I'm happy to receive more questions, also to go into detail, but I'm aware that I'm running over time, so I stop here.
Yeah, let's see, because time for questions now is shorter and shorter. Marion is summarizing questions, but it's okay. I mean, let's go and see how much time we have for that. Paddy, now, last but not least, you are in the last in the panel, but not the least for sure. Yeah, the floor is yours, please. You can condensate, 5 minutes as expected, and then we can go to the questions directly later. Yes.
Thank you very much. This is a very good discussion and some excellent insights into some of the lessons that have been learned across Europe. But what I'm going to aim to do is take you into the practical scenario of where we find ourselves in the Irish system. So a lot has changed in the last year, and it is delightful to say, or very positive to say, that the directives as published were well timed in the context of the Irish programme for the energy transition. So in summary, the framework is very helpful. It puts some challenges to the network operators to address, but the real positive for us, as mentioned earlier by our colleague in Res Co-op, is the Renewable Energy Support Scheme auction process, which has been developed and soon to be run, with our first qualifications completed in April for community projects to participate in what previously was very difficult. So I'm going to take you back previous to the last year or so in terms of the policy developments and the support schemes in the Irish energy system. We as a local energy agency have been very active along with many actors across Ireland, but in our specific region on energy efficiency. So I suppose I always start by saying energy efficiency still comes first, and on the demand side, we still need to reduce the energy demand where possible. So energy efficiency has experienced stronger supports in the Irish context earlier in the last decade, but towards the latter end of this decade, those supports have been reducing, or there has been a larger call on that small pot of supports around grants for energy efficiency projects at community level. So this year, for example, the national scheme was oversubscribed by almost twofold the available budget. So that's not the type of sustainable scenario we want to find ourselves in. And in these instances, lots of communities would have come together and aggregated projects. And in our case, and in our particular region, we would be the technical and aggregation support advisors, principally led by the local authorities. So the public sector playing their role within the directive to take the lead and carry these projects through. But we're very excited in the Irish context in the area of energy communities, the citizen energy communities, but also the renewable energy communities. So with that in mind, the auctions now provide an opportunity for community-led projects to participate in a community pot. So community projects will compete with each other in an auction. So this is a new breaking ground, because previously there was feed-in tariffs and it was based on energy production principally and primarily from wind, some CHP, and very little anaerobic digestion. So now the opportunity has opened up for communities to participate in larger scale. However, it is important to note that they're going to take some time to get ready. And I'm delighted to hear the Commission note that in their supports coming on this year, The first note mentioned there was increasing awareness, but also the publication of best practice. So within our Reg Energy project, which Res Co-ops are also partners with us in, we're doing an assessment of these case studies across Europe, and also looking at what models might fit. So the Irish government launched a programme in 2014 called Sustainable Energy Communities, and this is really looking at demand assessment and building capacity and some training and giving some capacity to these communities. So that's a great support scheme which registered communities who establish themselves, sign a participation agreement, can get some supports from the Irish state to get up and get ready and get organised. Some other towns then are a bit more advanced in terms of understanding the legislation and the new policies, and they are looking at these opportunities around decentralised generation, around peer-to-peer trading, private wire. And really for that to progress, it does require the transposition. And really that transposition is critical to maintaining the momentum around the opportunity to A, increase the production of renewables, B, give that flexibility that is so badly needed in the Irish network at the distributed level, but more importantly, and this is the critical piece, to generate that revolving fund that was mentioned in the context of the Heerlen in Netherlands, to create that revolving fund at the community level, which can be directed into investments in energy poverty, energy efficiency, and also create that local employment. So that opportunity for the economic growth at a local level is something that the Irish context as a rural region that we are in are struggling with employment. They're struggling with the population, depopulation, rural depopulation. And we really find that this is what we believe to be the real opportunity through the energy transition post-COVID, that we can now generate repopulation of the rural areas with sustainable employment, sustainable jobs, and ultimately retained revenue within those communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pat. Quite clear. Now we go, before starting to the questions, I can tell you there are about 300 participants connected. And Marion has prepared a question for these 300 participants after your explanation. And Legacy is going to be a live questions. Marion, please.
Yes, Manuel. I think we will launch the Q&A in first, and then we'll launch the word cloud. So you have already some of the questions appearing on the screen.
Okay, you're preparing. Yeah, that's. We have already several questions, and Marion grouped them in about 4. The first is going to be on financing, and is how communities can access EU funds and also local help, local promotions, if they are asking for funding and additional information. Who can ask this question? I think people who are really look at and has experience. I think from the ResCop would be interesting to get your opinion on that, and probably from the city of Heerlen. Could it be short? We have not so much time.
Sure.
Yeah, but
thanks,
please.
Manuel. Yeah, I'll try to be very poignant. So first, at the national level, several member states have developed, as Patty mentioned, a revolving fund. You saw this first in Scotland, where they basically provide grant-to-loan programs for the upstart developments of projects. So to get a feasibility assessment, to finance planning and this type of thing. If the project doesn't go through, then the risk is not on the participants. And if the project goes through, it turns into a loan so that it can be repaid back into the fund. Now, of course, this type of mechanism doesn't exist in many member states, and this is what we would like to see more of in different member states. Ireland is talking about it. The Netherlands is talking about it. Denmark has one. So, and there are a number of, I think Germany is even considering this. So I think this is a real good way to to sort of look at the financial tools that can be provided. There's still a lot of things that need to be discussed around maybe some financial assistance to low-income households so that they are better able to participate. At the EU level, of course, there are EU funds, and we are really looking to the EU investment mechanism and perhaps even the renewable energy financing scheme that the Commission is currently developing, which doesn't mention energy communities, but it very well could support them. So this is actually us also asking the EU to maybe make more information available to energy communities and to provide more upfront administrative support so that they are able to access EU funds that are coming under this in the forms of grants and loan support.
Okay, thank you very much, George. Hans, do you want to add something shortly? Or probably Paddy, yeah?
Well, from her perspective, I don't think that there's always an investing a problem with the investments that the communities have to make. But in our region, it's first starting to put up these communities. So to help them to start to come together, and that's why we are helping them on that way to start up and then have a good business case, to build a good business case. Yeah. So help them in front to get organized. That's the most important thing within our region at the moment.
Okay, now that's a really pragmatic approach. That's clear. All right. Okay. Then we have another question about the protection, consumer protection. And then it's about how to make sure that people, including vulnerable consumers, can participate and they will not be left out with higher cost. And also how to ensure consumer protection through energy communities. This is a very, very deep question. Probably some of you want to voluntarily answer to that. Yeah, please, Hans.
I can answer that. When you are organized, when the energy actually is local for local and you organize like a cooperative, it is always, you have to look, members have a cooperative, not a cooperative has members. That's a very important way of looking to when you organize like a cooperative, because the members are in charge actually. When a government give access to, I said, easy loan money, and they invest in energy projects like energy fields or an energy windmill or whatever, you can see that the cooperative mostly is in, and when they are really in charge and local empowered, they will refund the cost in a time period of 7 to 8 years. We have very good examples in the Netherlands. By example, Rivierenland, there the local government invests there about for 7 windmills, and the local cooperative refund the money in a period of 8 years. And then when they refund all the money, after that there will be a lot of money to invest in projects of local initiatives. So also in initiatives like energy poverty, by example. So people can choose their own path when it's about energy and what they can do with the money they really get, when they get what do you say that on the good word, when they get the possibilities to act on that kind of money. And I think it's a very important step that you organize like a cooperative and that you empower the people for the local to local energy system. I think that's very important.
All right, thank you very much. I think that covered that. We have another question, and I think in that case, even Paddy mentioned on that. It's about the energy efficiency contribution to the energy. The energy communities are going to contribute to the energy transition. but what about the support to renewables? What about energy efficiency? I think it's a very broad question. You, Pat, could answer this, or anybody? Yeah. Frauke and Pat, please. Starting by Pat, you mentioned specifically in your presentation, and then we to Frauke. For both answers, we have 3 minutes, no more. I wanted to tell you if we want to really go to the second question. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Yes, from the local energy agency perspective, working across a number of counties, energy communities, when they complete an energy efficiency project, they tend to do it once in their home or once in their business or once in their building. Whereas the renewable energy piece is the opportunity to have a sustainable relationship. Every day you need your power. So the opportunity to use the excess revenue, as mentioned by Hans in the last, after 7 or 8 years, that revenue that comes back in to the community, can then lever many more supports around the energy efficiency. So energy efficiency itself traditionally has a very long payback, and that payback can be very difficult to finance. But when you join the two together and you use that income generated at a community level, it can make the investments much more effective, much more efficient in energy efficiency. So I think some of the policy and some of the confusion around whether it's a citizen energy community or a renewable energy community, I understand why they must be segregated, but I must absolutely implore that energy efficiency is somehow, through policy and support schemes, incentivized to be utilized as a demand reduction model. Because without that, we will struggle to get the efficiency of our state or European Union to the levels that are required, and also to maximize the opportunity around renewable energy investment at the local community level.
Thank you. Frauke, you wanted to also add something more?
Yeah, I think we can look at energy efficiency from two sides. If we look at it in the traditional sense of energy savings, then I think energy communities help in particular, through simply creating a sense of energy. By participating, people have more awareness and may hence also opt for more energy efficiency measures and solutions. And including also, of course, a facet of community could be group purchasing of energy efficiency measures. But I think what is probably even more central for the energy transition is the system efficiency. And the system efficiency means using the assets in the most optimal way, helping us get rid of the need of fossil backup generation by activating the assets optimally, by making use of storage, by making use of demand-side flexibility potentials, shifting loads, by heating the home smartly, by charging electric vehicles smartly. That is where the core of the system efficiency will come from. And that's where communities can play a central role.
Okay, thank you very much, Frauke. Clear. We have not so much time. Even we have a question which is addressed to the Commission. I think Jan Panek would cover this. Is about whether the Commission believe or not that the energy community could have a cross-border effect in the internal market. I think this is part of your messages. But I want to listen to all of you. I mean, even those who are not participating, and put you one question. But I want you to respond in one word. The question is, what is the main driver, in your point of view, for the success of the energy communities? Can you summarize in one single word? Each of you. Let us start from Josh for the order of intervention. Josh, please.
Yes, I would say ambition, and I think this comes from the government side and from anybody who is in a position to support the development of energy communities.
Ambition. Okay. Then Hans, what do you summarize one single word for the successful?
Hans, you're muted.
Hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. Yes, drive.
Drive. Thank you. Then Lynn, how do you summarize? It's difficult.
Well, I see money coming up as a first thing, and I think we have to understand that the money, there is little saving in it. What Paddy said, that the focus should be on energy efficiency. I think that's the clue. So I think we need to seduce and not sell the concept of energy communities.
Okay, money. Frauke?
I would say interaction, and by that I don't just mean the interaction within the community, but also the interaction with the wider energy system to support the energy transition.
Integration, that might be integration. Interaction, okay. And Paddy?
Access. What I mean by access?
Yeah, what do you mean by access? Access to data, access to funds, access to
data, so smart metering, access to capacity around aggregation.
Okay. It's like,
access also to the network and use of the network.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Time is flying here in this kind of discussion. We can stay the full evening even discussing about such an exciting thing. Just to conclude, we have prepared, before entering to the final conclusions, one other question to the audience. Marion, the floor is yours. Marion?
Yes, Manuel. So we had in fact another questions that we wanted to put to the audience. So it's a yes, very easy question. It's a yes and no question. Do you think that energy communities, they can contribute to both the Green Deal and the recovery efforts of the EU? So let's see what the results will be.
That was part of the message from Katarina at the beginning, right? That I say
it seemed that the message was passed.
Yeah, but now you are putting now the question to the audience. Okay, let's see the result.
Well, it's very clear cut, I think. So that's a good sign that the message has been passed.
Large majority.
Indeed.
All right. Do you want anything else from your questions and summarizing of these answer and questions?
I think we should leave the floor to Jan for the concluding remarks.
Very good. Now, Jan, last but not least, we asked, excited from the beginning to see what is the conclusion, and you really will tell us what do you think about all the discussion and the topic itself. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I indeed was very pleased and honored when I was approached by Marion and Manuel and Katarina about the possibility of saying a few concluding words here. Not only was I pleased and honored because, as Manuel said in the very beginning, we used to work together 10 years ago or 7 years ago on smart grids and on retail issues and in DGNR, and we were at that time already thinking about energy communities and how can we actually empower consumers not only individually but also collectively. Yes. And It's always, it's always good to nostalgically go back to your old crime scenes. And I am very pleased to see that not only did our initial musing resulted afterwards in some very clear text in the regulatory framework, in the clean energy package for all, but also in some action on the ground that we were in. When we were kind of talking to the first pioneers, and Frauke at that time was already, I remember, one of our frequent interlocutors. I'm pleased to see that what we were discussing at that time as sort of pioneering concepts is now clearly taking hold and being replicated left and right, at least. If not left and right, then at least in many places in Europe. So this is very positive. I also see that I took a screenshot before the last question was posed, the last yes and no question, which was a bit obvious. Obviously, everybody hopes that it will contribute to the Green Deal. I found the previous one with the word popularity a lot more instructive, and I took a screenshot. I'm looking at it now, and the word community came out strongly, and engagement and empowerment. These were the words that came out very strongly, although not at the top, but they came in the sort of category of the second most frequent ones, right? Community, engagement, empowerment. So that's exactly what we wanted to achieve when we started talking about energy communities. And clearly, if that's what people now see actually happening, then it's very good. What I was surprised by very much was the fact that regulation actually comes as the key success driver. And I don't know how to read it. I can read it optimistically, and I can say that it is a success driver because by putting energy communities in the legislation, the Commission did the right thing and provided a regulatory framework. Or I can read it pessimistically, and I say we have not done enough. We have not yet provided the regulatory framework, and people are still calling for the right regulation. I don't know what it is. That I leave to your reflection, but it's clearly an interesting, stimulating signal. I also find it surprising that regulation should be coming out as a key success driver in an industry or in an activity which by its own nature is very creative and groundbreaking and rules defining, if you want. It's as if the e-commerce and the garage developers in the Silicon Valley 20 years ago were asking for more regulation about the beginnings of what is today Facebook and Amazon. So I'm puzzled, and luckily I'm not in Manuel's shoes, so I can be just puzzled and I don't have to resolve it. But I think it's an interesting dilemma, and I would certainly encourage everybody from today's discussion to give us more feedback on this. What exactly we should read into it. Now, why did I want to talk about energy communities? Also in my current job, which indeed has very little to do with energy specifically. I am now in charge of consumer policy horizontally in the Commission, in a unit called Consumer Policy in DG Justice. But why do we care about energy communities? For me, you are trying to show that energy communities can be the drivers of energy transition. At least as much, if not more, than individual consumers. We heard today about 40% of consumers being the followers, and therefore, someone needs to set the pace. And if we give them the possibility to associate themselves with something, it will go smoother. We also have seen how some sort of pooled action in an energy community can have a bigger impact on the system, but also on changing the rules of the game. So for all these reasons, you believe in energy communities, and we want to see them succeed, because we could then be asking ourselves, well, if this creation of a communal initiative within the energy can actually change the paradigm of the energy market and the behavior of consumers, surely we can replicate it more generically in in our efforts to change the overall consumption patterns of consumers. And that's what we are trying actually to do in DG Just, to empower consumers for changing their overall consumption habits, to equip them, to empower them so that they can actually opt for more sustainable purchase alternatives when they are making purchase decisions. We know from surveys and from focus groups that generally people are actually showing strong willingness by now to behave sustainably, not only as energy consumers but generally as consumers. If you ask people what is the main parameter by which they make a decision when they purchase a goods or a service, including energy supply service, then price obviously is still there at the top. I mean, probably always will be. 89%, I think, of the consumers say, well, my first consideration is price. But right after that, consumers say, well, some sort of environmental concern, some sort of sustainability consideration is the second most important criterion that I take into account. And it's very close after the price. All the rest comes later. The accessibility of the different versions of the products, the fact that this product compared to the other may be advertised by George Clooney or whomever. I mean, all these soft as well as hard criteria come only much later. Price is the most important, and environmental considerations the second most. So we are trying to say, okay, fine, if consumers have the willingness, and if they are telling us that all that holds them back is information, how can we actually get to them the right type of information and the right type of incentive in the form of knowledge? Because informed consumers are empowered consumers. Now, that information first and foremost obviously has to be based on some tangible criteria, tangible parameters like durability of goods, repairability of goods, how easily can you actually have it fixed if it breaks down, how long is it going to last, so are you getting good value for money? If you compare price, can you also compare the durability of the good and then see that maybe the cheapest is also the least durable, so it's worth investing a bit more and getting a longer lasting product, which is exactly the type of trade-off and calculation that we have already been stimulating people to do, for example, in energy efficient or energy consuming household products with the energy efficiency label. So the question is now, how can we replicate this experience more widely? But equally, if we could give them, besides this information, also information on good stories, how consumers in some pockets of Europe already acted sustainably and obtained something, then it would be obviously much more convincing. And energy communities can be one such example. So for those reasons, they are very important for us. But if they are going to be useful for us to the most, then we would need them to actually not be just communities of the insiders, and not just the community of people trying to do self-generation. And it's very good that towards the end of the discussion, we have actually spoken, and Leo and Paddy spoken about going beyond just renewables focused or renewable generation focused energy communities. How do we actually extend the concept of energy communities to energy efficiency? An ideal opportunity now with the buildings renovation wave is there. So, it's out there. It just needs to be grabbed. If you then can, through these expansions, more universalize the concept of energy community, it will become more of a stimulator also for our efforts in the wider context of sustainability. And finally, it's not only about going beyond renewables to energy efficiency, it's also about going beyond the few in the know, from the core to the wider consumer population, to the vulnerable groups, to the groups in rural areas, to the groups in remote locations. One thing that surprised me today, Covenant of Mayors and the Pact of Islands were never actually mentioned in the discussion today. When we were thinking of energy communities with Manuel and colleagues 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, this was the time when we put a lot of hope on initiatives like Covenant of Mayors. Today, I haven't heard it, and I don't know why. I'm just surprised. So I think these are the key remarks. As a last remark, I want to say that the plans that we have for the wider sustainable consumption initiatives have been published just yesterday. The Inception Impact Assessment, so-called, i.e. a 2-3 page document outlining the type of problem we want to tackle and the policy options that we see for it, has been published by the Commission for public scrutiny yesterday. It's open to public scrutiny for, I think, up to 10 weeks or 8 weeks, so for quite a long time. And in addition to this, next week we will be launching an open public consultation with questions about how should consumer policy change so that it actually can more motivate and more empower, but also protect consumers in their efforts to become more sustainable. So watch out for that, and please join us by responding to the OPC, the Open Public Consultation. So with that little bit of advertisement, I will conclude, and I will thank you again for a very nice discussion in the last hour and a half.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jan. Well, thank you very much to all the speakers and the panelists, and of course the more than 300 people we have in the audience. And thank you very much, especially to Marion, who has organized this session, contacting with all of you, managing the question, and helping really a lot. The typical thing, without her, that could not be helped. Thank you very much, Marion.
Thank you, Manuel,
nice
and thank
evening.
you to everyone.
Thank you, Manuel.
Bye-bye.